this week's episode, we talk about how to choose your battles visually.
Right. When do you fight for what you need, and when do you sit back and just let life happen?
So, stick around.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Rare with Flair,
The podcast where two best friends with the same rare disease are living our best lives. I'm your host, Cassandra.
And I'm your host, Casey.
Hello.
Cass. Have you been?
You know, I've been better, but
You've been better? Sorry, I'm not laughing at that. That sounded wrong for me to laugh at you. It was the way you said it. It was the way you said it.
No, Romana's been better, actually. So she got super sick this past week. And now she's back home. But she spent 2 days at the hospital.
And that is so hard. Everybody send your well wishes to Miss Queen Oro. She is doing better, but she could still use your love and your prayers as she heals fully.
Yes.
But I'm so glad she's back home and she's next to you as you record your pod, as they should be.
I know. It makes me feel so happy that she's feeling better, because they feel so sad when they're sick, and you just want to help them, but you can't. You can do your best, but you can't fix them.
You can't really even communicate to them what's going on, which is hard. So
I know, and it's they feel guilty, and it's not their fault.
Mine is literally coughing into the microphone as we speak. I don't know if you heard that.
Let me be heard.
Yeah, he sure did. It's always something with these animals. It's mom life. Hashtag mom life.
Hashtag mom life. I never feel more like I have a child than when I have a sick dog.
Yeah, you're up all hours of the night cleaning.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
It's
truly.
It's a time. But how are you?
I am doing good. I have to mention to you this book I just read, because I think the audience may be interested in this. So I just read this book. It is a contemporary romance book, okay? And it's called Hello Stranger by Catherine Center. And the reason I'm bringing this up is in the book, our main character has a brain surgery that kind of goes wrong, and she gets this issue where she has face blindness and she can't recognize people's faces. So her vision is totally fine, but she just cannot recognize or distinguish people's different faces. But I found the book to be so relatable, because from a blind standpoint, because she is constantly getting into really awkward situations where people know her, but she doesn't recognize them. And people think she's rude for not saying hi. Right. And she's so stressed about being rude. And even if people know about her condition, they forget. And they're you don't know me. Who am I? And the whole thing kind of revolved around this.
Guess who?
And it was so cute. And I know there aren't that many blind books out there. And I know that this isn't technically a blind book, but I found it relatable as a legally blind person. So I think if anybody is interested, it was a cute little rom-com. And I found a lot of it to be very relatable. So
that sounds like fun in the context of the book. And also deeply relatable. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Totally.
That's awesome. And
so I was
Thanks for sharing.
I was going to tell you about it, just you. And then I was I'm just going to save it for the pod. Hashtag save it for the pod. That's what we do. I've already said hashtag twice in this opener because I'm a millennial and I'm embarrassing myself. But we always used to say that, save it for the pod. So I saved it for the pod. Anyway, but...
Love it.
But yeah, unless there's anything else with you, we can just jump right in.
Yeah, let's just get going. You had a good Valentine's Day, yeah?
Yes, I had a good time. Went out to dinner with my boyfriend. It was lovely, and I ate candy and things. And did you have a good Valentine's Day?
It was a day. I went to the gym, and it was nice. I liked going to the gym. That was about it.
Good.
I printed out some Valentines for my friends. And like the day after, went to a little Galentine's breakfast brunch thing that one of my friends had, and I got to hand out Valentines, which was fun. But it was fun.
Actually, I actually spent the actual Valentine's Day with my friend Ashley, because I saw my boyfriend the next day, and so we actually watched Bridesmaids together, had a little Galentine's. It was very fun. I kind of forgot about it. It's been a minute since that happened, so I was trying to rack my brain on what that weekend even looked like.
I know, I know. Well, so like we had talked about it, so I wanted to like follow up.
Yeah, recap. It was a good time. Yeah. So, yeah. Fun times. But yeah, we can jump in. Of course, something happened in our lives that made us think of this episode, because that's usually how things go here at Rare with Flair. So, if anybody is involved with NOAA, the National Organization for Albinism and Hypopigmentation, Cass and I are very involved. I work for NOAA. Cass is a very active volunteer for NOAA, and we both do a lot with them. And recently, we've talked about this on the pod before, but there are a few people with albinism in the movie Wicked. And we recently had one of those actors, Cameron Yule, come on to a NOAA Connections Zoom call and chat with us. And some of those clips are on YouTube, on NOAA's YouTube channel. I highly recommend going and checking it out. But
I will link it in the show notes. I will do my best.
Yeah, that'd be great. That would be great. And in this video, if you go check it out, Cameron talked about an interesting phenomenon of kind of the whole thing with choosing your battles as a disabled person. And she was saying, in the context of the entertainment industry, she needs to ask for help and accommodations, of course, because she is a person with a vision impairment. However, she kind of was saying in her interview that she tries to read the room, and she tries to maybe not ask for too much, because it is a cutthroat industry. And if you are I mean, sadly, it's sad that this is how it is, but if you are too much of, an issue or a burden to the cast and crew, like, you might not be asked to work again. And that is, it's unfortunate, but that's kind of how it is. And so Cameron was in this, caught between a rock and a hard place, kind of trying to decide how to ask for enough without, slowing down the production. Because, of course, in a big production like Wicked especially, time is of the essence. They can't just stop for every little thing. And so she had to kind of be her own advocate. She had to bring her own sunscreen that she was reapplying and things like that. But of course, the Wicked, not to say anything bad about the Wicked cast and crew, because they were very helpful for anything she needed, but she just wanted to be really aware of reading the room. And I think that's something Cass and I have talked about as disabled people, of having that ability to read the room, and like not just like freaking out over every little thing, but also choosing our battle, like what we're talking about, like asking for things when we need it, but not making a scene about every little thing. And that can be a hard road to walk, a hard balance there.
And it's so context dependent, as we'll get into now, because in certain circumstances we will ask for more, and it's not only context dependent on, our vision and where we are at the time, like if we're outside versus inside, where, we're super light sensitive, as we've explained, and so outside is generally harder for us to see. Or, like we try based on the situation, reading the room, our current needs, to strike the right balance of, do I like make myself known and important or not? And a lot of times you do have to, right? Like, we're not saying don't ask for what you need. Obviously, we have plenty of episodes where we've talked about the importance of advocating for yourself, and you need to do that as someone with a disability. But I think once you've built up a lot of those advocacy skills, knowing when to apply them so that you get what you need when you need it most is really, really important.
Yeah. And like we've said before, the world was not built for us, and there's going to be a lot of things that we need accommodated for us, but also we don't want to really go through life with this chip on our shoulder of, no one wants to help me and I'm aggravated all the time kind of thing. And I mean, I feel that as I've gotten older, I've gotten better about advocating for myself, and I've gotten less afraid to ask for help. But I also think, like you said, it's really dependent on the situation. And if I, back to Cameron from Wicked, if I were on a big movie set, I would try not to rumple feathers as much as I could, but I would also still stand up for what I needed, especially if it was something that I really needed. It's I think it's very, very situation based.
Okay, so situations where I feel like I try to be really proactive and ask for a lot of help are times where I think time is of the essence. I'm thinking airports, right? Airports.
Yes.
Usually I will err on the side of more help than not enough. I'm pretty familiar with a lot of airports, just given that I travel a lot. But, especially when I have a dog, like making sure that I get help, or if there's like a really tight layover. I did this a couple times recently where I had a short layover, and I had asked at the gate, like at the first flight that I was going to, when I knew that the layover was like 30 minutes, I was like, listen, I need someone to point me in the right direction, or that I could follow. I think they had a term for it at the airport. I think it was, it was like guided assistance, or something like that, where I could literally just either hold on to or follow someone from the gate. And I don't particularly like having like the wheelchair. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but when I have a guide dog, it's not really a possibility because guide dogs aren't trained to make space for a wheelchair. So I usually just tell them like, no, I can walk. I just want someone to take me there, so I don't have to do a lot of hard work or waste a lot of time trying to use my own eyes or my phone to read these signs and potentially miss my flight.
I think that's such a good example, and I have chosen battles at the airport for sure. I've had times where I've had a quick layover, even recently, where I was in the wheelchair because I don't have a guide dog, and they sat me down and they were like, okay, well, we'll be back later. We've got to empty the whole flight before we get you to your gate. And I did choose my battle at that moment. And I was like, actually, no, I've got to go now. I showed them the time. I was like, I literally don't have time. Like, I can't wait. And they did get somebody, but if I hadn't spoken up, I would have probably missed my flight. Because they don't pay attention to when your next flight is. You have to be your own advocate. Like, you have to be paying attention to these things. You can't just trust that they're going to do it. In fact, they're probably not going to do it. So you've got to be your own advocate. And so I think that's such a good example. Like, when time is of the essence, there's no playing around. Okay, like when you're in a time crunch, you've got to choose your battles at that moment, and you've got to maybe be a little annoying or a little persistent to get what you want. The squeaky wheel gets the grease. And sometimes you don't need to be persistent, but in those situations, I do think for sure. Yeah.
I think other times to be like, just to be pushy really, is like also when your health is at stake. When you're not doing well, you really need to be pushy in your medical consultations to tell them, this is not vision related, this is more like chronic health related, right? But to tell them, I saw a really great reel on Instagram of like really good phrases that you can say to your medical professional to tell them how much a situation is not working, right? Like, instead of, you really have to make your needs known, right? So instead of just waiting for them to be like, well, let's wait and see, like saying things like, this particular issue has really affected my quality of life, and give some examples like this, like my friends and family have noticed that this is affecting my life, or this is preventing me from doing things that I normally would be able to do. These are like key phrases that you can say to really make sure that you make your needs known, because if you sit around and wait, things may get worse.
Oh, you've got to advocate for yourself, especially if you're like in the hospital for any reason.
Yes.
Oh my goodness. Like, you're going to slip, things are going to slip through the cracks. And you have to be, it's really great too, especially if you have a family member there that knows your health history that can also advocate for you. Because if you're in bed and you're sick, I mean, obviously that's hard. So it's good to have someone there who's ready to step out in the hallway and say, hey, we need this thing, you know, if needed. I think if we're going, do you have any more to say about the medical? Because I have another time where you really need to choose your battle.
Not really. Like, I think I'd have just more of a general topic of, like, making sure that also your people around you know that, like, know your needs, like what you were saying, and being okay to rely on others. Because my problem has always been, like, hyper-independence, and that's something that I am trying to unlearn with age. And this year especially, I think, is a really good undoing of hyper-independence and being okay to rely on friends and family to get places when I really need to. Like when Romana was really sick, speaking of sort of health, I reached out to a lot of different people saying like, hey, can you give my dog and I a ride? Because it was literally just one of those situations that if I could drive, I would take her, obviously.
Right.
But I don't want to take a sick dog in an Uber and potentially get in trouble with the Uber if she gets sick in the Uber, right?
Right, yeah. Totally. I think that's a great point. Like, you need to have those people who are also willing to fight for you and advocate for you. I think another time where you need to choose your battles and to fight for your rights is discrimination. And we recently made an episode about this a few episodes back, if you want to go check it out. But if you ever feel that legally something is at stake, you know, especially, I don't think that's a time to just sit down. And the reason why, too, is, and I think you and I see eye to eye on this too, Cass, is like, we don't see it as just for us. Like, we see it for other people too. So if someone is like legally discriminating against us, we want to put that person in their place, not just for us, but so that they will not do it again in the future to someone else. And that is a big thing for me, is like, I just don't want this to happen to the next generation. We need to stop it here and now. Right. And so I think that's another time where I don't sit silent and I try to actually stand up for myself. And that's another thing, is like, know your rights. Like, know the Americans with Disabilities Act, know your rights. And if you know your rights, then you'll know when it's time to speak up and when it's time to sit back and not fight at that moment, you know. And you don't have to, like, fight, like I'm not telling you to fight and curse at these people. I'm just saying, when I say fight, I mean just to stand up for what you know is right. And
if someone is saying, sorry, we can't do that, you can say, no, you need to do this, right?
No, actually,
in a
I know my rights, and
educated way.
Mm-hmm. Kind and educated. And a lot of times you'll put them in their place and they're like, yeah, you got to be firm and you've got to know your rights. And a lot of times they'll be like, oh, never mind, you're right. You know, like, because if you are educated and you speak with confidence, then you can't go wrong, honestly. Like, yeah. Knowledge is power.
Absolutely. And yeah, I think like I'd love to talk about proactivity too, because that's another area in which you can choose whether, like, how much you disclose, where we've talked about disclosing a lot before in different contexts. Disclosing for work, disclosing with friends or family. And that can be anything from just talking about your experience to disclosing because you have a need for something. I don't know if you had anything to add in, like, times where it's, like, really crucial to really make sure that you have what you need.
I honestly think those are the top ones I can think of, that we were just mentioning, like when time, medical, discrimination, when something is really, really going to impact your life. There are certain times where maybe it won't really impact the situation and you just need to let it go and it's frustrating. But I think those are the top times where you really do need to fight for your rights.
Or if this actually, here's one more, or I don't know if this has multiple parts, but when the stakes are high, you know, time is a high stake, right? But like, one could be financial investment, right? So if you put in a lot of money to, say, go see a theater show, and it's really important to you that you see it because you spend a lot of money, making sure that you're able to advocate for your right to, say, use audio description or being proactive and looking for that. That's really important. Or if it has to do with your job security or your academic standing, you definitely need to voice your opinions because, you know, we're not going to talk super much about academics just because it's been quite a while since either of us were in school. But, you know, if you're not being tested on how well you can see the material, this is something my mom always said to me, encouraging me to make sure that I had the accommodations I needed to succeed in school. You're being tested on how well you know the material. Like, I failed some math quizzes because I didn't want to bother them, and they were like, sorry, we can't send this to disability services. Like, you can take it like this, right? And you have to be strong enough to say, no, I can't, because I need to be tested on how well I know the material, and I can only do that with assistive technology.
Right. And you know, this is why we say choose your battles, because we don't necessarily expect the world to cater to us for every little thing. Not everybody is educated about low vision. Not everyone's going to automatically know what we need. And so if we tried to fight for every little thing, it would really do us a disservice, because it would probably just exhaust us at the end of the day if we were really like, you know, with every little thing. However, with these bigger things that really are going to impede our work life or different things like that, that is when it's important. And I think you'll know when you come across certain issues, you'll know what's worth really, really fighting for. And it's not to say not everything is worth fighting for, but it's when it's going to mess with your health. So if there's something you're really fighting for that it's just going to exhaust you, and maybe, you know, it's not something that's needed at the end of the day, like, it might just make you more tired than anything, and it might just ruin your day, or you might have to be on the phone for hours and waste your time, and that's not something you want. So it's just kind of up to you of what you think is worth, you know.
Yeah, like, use discretion and you know, make sure that you're not affecting your future self. Like, you don't want to fail something. You don't want to, you know, get poorly rated at your job because you didn't ask for an accommodation, right? And if you know, you can ask yourself some questions like, if I don't do this, what are the potential consequences? If I disclose later, will that affect my performance review, for example? Or will my employer say, you should have let someone know? It's hard to gauge you now. So, like, you have to ask yourself how this could potentially impact you. And if the stakes are high, ask for what you need.
Right. But you also, you know, you don't want to burn bridges and come off as this really difficult person. So I know it can be hard, because it's like going back again to what Cameron was saying, is like, you can't hold up a whole production for every little thing, and you've got to read the room. So you don't want, it's such a hard line to walk. But I think in those situations, it's absolutely worth fighting for. Yeah.
But about, like, going off of that, times where I wanted to talk really quick about productivity before we get into some times that are much, much more subjective, right? But, like, it's your choice whether or not you want to disclose and be proactive. I think as time has gone on, I've both decided to disclose more and less.
Yes. That's so
it's
true.
Weird because
it is weird. Yep.
With friends and stuff, I've disclosed a bit less. And when it's become more relevant, or something in my health or my vision where I'm like, listen, I can't get a ride there because my ride service won't take me that far, right? Like, making sure you have what you need. And also with your friends, you want them to trust you, so you have to also be a little bit vulnerable. But, you know, I don't personally, we've talked about this in other episodes last year, we don't share as much about our day-to-day lives with our friends unless it kind of comes up, right?
Yeah.
But more in the sense that I think especially when I think of my thoughts for, as I've explained, Romana was a guide dog and she retired last year, so I haven't had a working service dog really for, oh gosh, like almost a year now. So, but when I think ahead for whenever I'm able to have a successor dog, I think there are some things I would do differently, especially disclosing up front. It is not legally required for me as a service dog handler to disclose up front. I'm thinking of Ubers and Lyfts, right?
Right. Yeah.
And so I never did. But that also probably earned me a lot more drivers that showed up because I had not disclosed. They were, they saw my dog, they said no, and then they drove away. And that's just more headache and more frustration for me because I've already experienced it.
Yes,
There was a part of me that had thought, back then when I was angrier and also more naive and thought that, well, I don't want to give them the opportunity to pre-discriminate against me if I disclose up front. But that affects my life. Like, I just want to get to where I need to go without having to fight every time. So, in the future, I am going to disclose up front. And if they don't want to pick me up, then that sucks. But I need to go where I need to go. So I'm just going to tell them I have a service dog, and they'll choose whether or not to pick me up. And if I disclose ahead and they still refuse me, then that's on them, and I can easily report them.
Heck yes. Well, that's a great example of what I was saying earlier is like, if it's going to put more strain on your life, like if it's going to just if this fight is just going to exhaust you, then you don't need to fight that fight sometimes. And if that's going to be an extra fight you have to fight, if disclosing early is going to keep that fight from happening, then I would save yourself. Like if it's like, it's an important fight to fight, but we can't be the ones fighting that every day, or our lives are going to be horrible.
Gosh,
we can't be doing that.
You're so right. And it kind of ruins your day. Like when it happens,
of course.
You get to where you need to go late, and then it's embarrassing, and then you're just kind of frustrated, and like it's not worth it. We don't need that to happen.
No, and that's just it's one of the perfect examples of something that's not really worth that fight.
No.
If you can keep
not to me, at least.
Yeah, right, not to you at least. And if you can avoid it before the fight happens, then that would be ideal,
Right.
Yeah, and obviously, like we talked about it in our discrimination episode, obviously Uber and Lyft and all of those rideshare services, it is really, really sad how a lot of guide dogs and service dogs are treated in that. But sometimes you can't fight that battle every day because you're just one person and you're just trying to get to your appointment or your whatever you're trying to get to. And you don't have the mental capacity every time to just like prove your rights to somebody when you're just trying to have a normal day. Like, it's just not feasible. So yeah.
Okay, do you want to talk about times where maybe disclosing isn't all that necessary?
Yeah, I think, do you have one on the top of your mind?
I guess like a subjective situation. So I joined a choir recently, and this is a time where I did decide to advocate for myself. But I did weigh it, right? So I joined a choir recently, and I had disclosed up front, like, I'm legally blind, I can see, but not very well. So mostly because I needed my music to be sent to me as PDF so I could see it from my iPad, because I can't read physical sheet music. So I'm also not the only person who uses an iPad to read music, which is actually pretty cool. But recently one of my friends is in it, and she a lot of times will pick me up and we'll go together. And we got there a little bit, like a couple minutes after rehearsal had already started. And so some of the only seats available were on the far aisle, basically, like away from where the director was standing. And I did try to make nice and see, like, okay, can I sit here? But the longer I sat there, I was like, I can't see the director, and I can't fake I can see the director, and I can't use a monocular and also read my sheet music. I just don't think this is possible. And so I did wait. I tried to wait for a time where it was going to be a little less conspicuous to make that shift, but we didn't get a break that we normally get halfway through rehearsal that time. So I did have to make a little bit more of a scene. And that was a situation where I was like, okay, I know for a fact that I can't sit anywhere but the aisle that's like right in front of the director. So, you know, when my rideshare picked me up late this past week, I had to like come in and tell someone like, hey, listen, I need to sit here because I cannot see the director otherwise. But it was a situation where I really considered, like, is this going to be really obnoxious? But, you know, the cons outweighed the pros. If I'm off, the director's going to get mad at me. And that's one of those situations where, you know, I'm not being judged on how well I can see the director. I'm being judged on how well I can follow. And I can't follow if I can't see.
Right. It wasn't necessarily like an end of the world situation, but you do want the best for yourself in the choir, and you want to do your best. And I do think when it comes to things that don't matter as much, so like we've talked about before, people, you know, pointing to something and saying, look at that, and we kind of pretend or we lie, like, oh yeah.
Cool.
I just really don't think you have to disclose every single time and say, I can't see it. It gets exhausting. It gets annoying. There was a situation recently. I'm not going to say the person's name or like what it was, but I was talking to you about it actually. Someone showed me something on their phone. And it was kind of far away from me. And in the moment, they were sitting across a table from me. And so I just didn't want to fight that battle of like, oh, wait, can you, I glanced at it. I said, oh, yeah, okay, great. And then I realized a little later I maybe hadn't seen it as well as I could have. Mm-hmm. But sometimes, like in the moment, you have a snap moment to decide if this is something you're gonna like quote unquote fight.
Is it worth me seeing? Like, do I really need to see it?
Right. Right. And maybe sometimes you think back and say, maybe I wish I would have fought to see that a little better, but a lot of the times it's something that's not going to matter that much, and you can kind of just act like you saw it. If your time and your money and your work is not on the line,
and if you care, like being so honest,
do you care?
You care enough, like
if you care enough.
The showing on your phone is such a big one, because people will show like, oh, look at this really funny thing on my phone, and I'm just like, okay, it's not that, it's not earth-shattering. But one of my friends was, she and her fiance are renovating a house, and she was like, oh, look at this nook that we created. And I was like, well, I want to see that. Personally, I had personal interest in looking at it, and so it was like, oh, hey, do you mind? And so I usually just say, like, do you mind? And kind of reach for their phone, and usually people will just hand it to me. So, you don't always have to make it a whole thing either. You don't have to be like, I cannot see your phone from where you are showing it to me.
Right,
can you
right.
Please
you don't need to make it a whole thing unless you really do care about the thing. Yeah.
Exactly.
But I think, like, we're also used to not being able to see much. And so... Okay, so, like, I think a good example is a wedding. Like, I went to a wedding recently in the fall, and I kind of sat toward the back with a group of my friends, because that's just where we ended up being seated, right? Could I really see, like, the wedding? I mean, I could see the outlines of people. I could see generally what was going on, and I could hear the vows, and I could hear the music, and I could hear all of that. And then, at a wedding, typically people will, like, cut the cake or whatever. And sometimes you watch that. Sometimes you watch the first dance. Sometimes you watch these different things. Do I really care about, I've got to be in the front for every single thing and see every single thing? Maybe sometimes, but personally for me, and this is just personal, this might be different for everybody, I'm so used to not being able to see a lot of things that, like, for me, sometimes just hearing it is enough, or just kind of getting a gist is enough. I'm not going to fight my way up to the front and fight this battle, because once again, like we've said, that's exhausting to me. Like, that's exhausting to try to fight through the crowd, fight through the people, make a big scene when really, does it matter that much? You've got to choose, does it matter that much? And I actually want to talk to parents who are listening to this, like parents of small children. I think my parents tried to get me to the front of everything when I was little, tried to push through the crowds to see, and I'm appreciative of that. But I do think maybe don't stress it as much as you maybe think you need to, because your kid is probably going to be happy enough.
You can ask your kid, like, hey, do you want to see that?
Yeah.
And like, maybe they'll say yeah, and so then you can help them fight for it. Because if they're going to be like, well, if they're going to be sad later on, like, oh, well, I didn't really end up getting to see it. Right. Maybe make it more of a big deal, but you don't have to see everything. And I think also, especially as an adult, you can make those calls better, right? Like, if it was a friend's wedding, I would maybe try to sit toward the front because I really want to see my friend get married. But if it's like, some family member that you aren't that close with, like, it's okay. Right. Like, you don't have to see that close. I've quote unquote watched entire movies with friends sitting on the couch because at the moment you have to decide what's more important. Would I rather sit with my friends or sit close to the TV and not sit with my friends?
Exactly. And that's a decision we all come across in this life, all low vision people. And I think for an example like the wedding or a parade or whatever, sometimes even when you are on the front row, you still can't really see. So like sometimes that doesn't even matter that much, and you just choose that battle of like, I'm not gonna like force my way up to the front. Whatever. But I agree. I think like the watching a movie thing is so important. You've got to decide, why am I watching this movie? Am I watching this movie because I really, really want to see this movie? Or am I watching this movie because I'm enjoying quality time with my friends right now?
Right.
And it might be both. It might be either or, but you've got to decide what's more important to you in that moment. And it's going to be different at different times. Like it might be you really want to see that movie and you need audio description, you need these things. But sometimes you're just hanging with friends and you don't really care about the movie that much, and you're kind of chatting with your friends and it's just on and you don't really have to see it. So,
right. I watched the football national championships, or the college football national championships, and I was there with my friends. I don't really care about football. I went to Ohio State, so it was fun and exciting that Ohio State, and it was a good game,
a big deal
too.
That they were in the
But like, I didn't care that much. So
right.
I sat sort of close, but if I really wanted to see, I would have sat right in front of the TV, and I didn't really care. So periodically, I would be like, "Wait, what's the score now?" Just
yeah.
I think it also just went to show that I didn't care that much. I was more just there for the company, right? So you have to, in the moment, decide what is the most important thing for me right now.
Yeah, and I think plenty of us can relate.
Right.
Oh, wait, go on. Sorry.
Like the... No, absolutely. It's just like, is it the thing that's going on? Is it preserving my reputation? Or is it, hanging out with the people? Or... I'm thinking of what Cameron was saying of like, you don't want people to be put out because you keep asking for stuff. Decide and prioritize, and you have like you said, Case, like you have a few seconds to make a judgment call usually.
Yeah. Usually you only have a few seconds.
And be like, no, it's really not that deep. Like, I don't care that much. And if I miss this, it's not going to make me look bad.
Yeah. You could probably use, the thing people say of like, will it matter in 5 years kind of thing. You could almost make that judgment call. Will it matter in 5 years if you didn't catch the plot of that movie? No. But will it matter in 5 years if you're legally discriminated against? Well, yeah, probably. Maybe, So, like... It really, you're going to run the whole spectrum of different things. You have to kind of make a judgment call in that moment. Is this important? And yeah, if it's going to cause a big fight or cause a big thing and you're just not in the mood that day, you're just tired, then don't worry about it. Like you don't have to worry about it.
It reminds me of like when we've talked about this a lot, especially you've shared it a lot about when you're a kid and other sighted kids are like, I can't see it, I can't see it. And it's just like, who cares? Who cares?
I knew I was about to say this, and I knew that's what you were about to say when you started to say it. And it's so true. Like, I remember as a kid, like, I'm such a weird, I'm such like a childlike, excitable person. But I'm also kind of like when I was a kid, I was kind of like a these kids kind of kid. You know what I mean? Like kind of an old soul. Like, oh, these kids are way too competitive. These kids, like whatever, they care about the weirdest things. And I just remember like when they would be pushing toward the front, I can't see, freak. I remember standing there being like, oh, brother, like, are you kidding me right now? Like rolling my eyes. Like, I can't believe that they're making such a deal out of not being able to see this. But you know, clearly.
And again, there are ways that you could probably discreetly get around some of these things without always having to, you know, raise your voice, right? So, you know, if you can't see something like a presentation, take a picture on your phone. Use your monocular. I've sat on the couch and watched a movie with my friends using my monocular, mostly because we were watching Dune, and without audio description, there is much silence in that movie. I would have been, I simply would have just been bored if I didn't.
No, I know, right.
So there are ways to do it where it's not like, you know, the biggest, most obnoxious, loud thing in the world, where you can figure out what you need and then just do it yourself if you can do it yourself.
Yeah, I agree.
Do you have any other examples to share?
I think, well, when you were talking about your choir example, I was thinking of, so I lead worship music. I have done it at my church and at a Bible study, and Cassandra has done it at her church too, and now she's doing the choir. And I think a good example of, you know, like, I need a stand and my iPad to be able to do this, and that's not typically how it's done. Typically, at my Bible study, they have like a big screen in the back where people can read the words. Obviously, I can't do that. So I've gotten to the point now in my life where I just tell them. I don't really give it as an option. I'm not like, hey, can I do this? I'm like, hey, I'm going to bring this stand and my iPad because that's what I need. And so I think sometimes you don't even have to like choose the battle. Sometimes you could just like not even ask for the accommodation, just kind of do it, especially if it's not going to matter. Like I knew that they wouldn't care.
Yeah, and especially when, like, there's really not another way that this would work. Like, you're not going to stand there and sing with your monocular so that you can see the screen at the back. Like, that's not going to work. Right. That's going to look weird, right? Right, and, like, is this going to put them out? Is it going to be an issue for them? No. Like, when you really think about there's so many different situations, and this situation in particular is not going to like hurt the situation. It's not going to bother them. So sometimes you don't even need to ask. You just say, this is what I'm doing. This is what I need. You don't need to make a big deal out of it. You know? Yeah. And if they push back, you can stand your ground. But generally, I think most people will just take your word for it and say, okay. I remember like when I used to run cross country in high school, way back when now, I had to wear a hat. Because running in and out of the woods and in between trees, the light would flicker into my eyes and I would be like blinded temporarily a lot of the time, and I wouldn't be able to see where I was going. And that was a question of my safety, and also it was painful. So, you know, sometimes people put up silly arguments like, well, if we do it for you, we'd have to do it for everyone. Like, no, you don't. No, you absolutely don't need to do it for everyone. And there were times where, like, I remember at different courses, people would be like, well, we have to make sure that that's okay. And I'm like, how would this affect anyone in any way, shape, or form?
Exactly. Like, I feel like when it comes to competitions and stuff, it can be more like, oh, well, we've got to check the rules or whatever, you know?
Yeah.
But I like your story about choir, because you didn't like stop the whole choir rehearsal and say, hey, everybody, hold on. Like, you found an issue that you had and you were like, I'm going to take care of it and not cause a scene. I'm going to take care of it myself. And you did. And you like found your way. And I think like sometimes you can discreetly change things around without having to really like make it a big thing too,
Right. And like I go into rehearsal with my cane anyway, so it alleviates some of the questions, because sometimes if you don't have any tools, people are like, wait, why, or whatever, but people see me looking at my music and having to zoom in and pan back and forth really quickly so I can read the music, and then they, I think, get the idea of like, oh, her vision must be really bad. So anyway, in that situation, I didn't even involve the director. And I could have, right? But he noticed what happened. And afterward, he like talked to me quietly. He was like, hey, if I ever put you in a place where you can't see, like, let me know, right? So sometimes, even if you, like, when you do it discreetly, people will take notice and they'll be like, oh, man, maybe I should have known better, right?
Yeah.
But, I didn't have to, like, make an announcement like, hello, everyone.
Right.
I cannot see well.
Yeah, no, you really don't. Most of the time you don't. Most of the time people aren't even noticing it as much as you think they may be, and, like, it's just fine. And you can just make your accommodations for yourself most of the time, and, but sometimes, like you said, they're not trying to not accommodate for you. They just don't remember. So sometimes you have to do things to remind people. But yeah, like, you don't have to yell and scream about it, but you also don't need to sit in silence and suffer and not get what you need. There is a medium. You need to get what you need, and you need to do it in a kind way and an efficient way, and try not to waste people's time, but also get what you need, and don't worry about being a burden, because if you need it, you need it. But also, do try to be mindful of people's time and money. And like Cameron was saying about the Wicked thing, you've got to be mindful of other people's time. You can't just make it all about you. Like, that's not how it works. But it is important to include people with disabilities in this area. So we've got to find a middle ground.
Yeah. And, decide if it's not a need and if it's more negotiable. I mean, do you even care enough? Like, is it that deep of a thing, right? If someone is pointing at something and saying, look over there, you can say, okay, cool. But if someone's like, if there's an emergency going on.
Right. Oh,
you gotta know. But also if you actually care, like someone gasps and is like, oh my gosh, look at that thing over there. And then you can be like, wait, what? Can you explain? Because you want to know.
Right. Yeah. Absolutely. And I think if you're a younger listener, as you age, you will find out what matters to you and what doesn't. And there will be times where you might go overboard or underboard. You might not hit it on the head, hit the nail on the head the exact way you want, but you'll learn what matters to you and what you need, I think, too.
Let me see. I'm trying to think. Is there a situation where you feel like you over advocated?
I think, I don't know if this would be over advocated, but just kind of what we said of oversharing, which we did do a whole episode on, like word vomiting our struggles. And I think that's something we've really learned how to find a happy medium with. So I don't know. I don't know about if that would be considered over advocating, but I do think I stay a little more quiet about certain things nowadays. In some ways, it was like you said at the beginning of the episode. In some ways I do, and in some ways I'm louder. So it's kind of weird. I don't know. Like, in some ways I advocate more. But
I think it comes down to we advocate more for things that matter more, and we overshare less for things that are more inconsequential.
Yeah, and that's something that's a balance we've had to strike. Like, we've had to learn that.
Oh, absolutely.
That's growing pains. Like, when you're born, you don't know, like, the level to which you need to share and what you need, and so many people start at different levels of that. Some people start, like, really oversharing. Some people never share anything about their disability, and we all are on different paths with that. But
yeah, and some people find more of an identity with it, in the sense that they like being, they like extra attention for the sake of extra attention, and there's nothing wrong with that. There are different people. Personally, I don't want that. Like, I do just kind of want to be a person. it doesn't matter as much that people know everything about me. But I've also stopped being as I guess cagey or defensive about it all, because I don't want, for a long time I didn't want the pity, but now I'm just being more open and asking for things because it's good to rely on others. And I've learned this from other people with disabilities, with different disabilities, that have just advocated for their needs, and they have no problem asking their family and friends for help when they don't drive either. Different disabilities, not in visual. And they're like, I always get a ride from my wife or sister or whatever because that's what I need. And that's okay and good. That is okay. And you should be able to get what you need. And I, speaking for myself, shouldn't have to feel shame for asking for that.
I love that. And that, I do think this whole episode, there is like kind of an umbrella of shame with asking for what you need. And you might feel embarrassed. You might feel like you're too much. And we really want to tell you that you don't ever need to feel that way, even though we often feel that way too. So it's something that you never quite get over. Like, we're not over here on the other side, like, oh, we're perfect all the time. We never feel that way. But I do think when you're asking for what you need, know your rights. Seriously, learn your rights. Know them. Have the knowledge that you can speak confidently about your rights. Advocate for yourself, and like you'll go far with that. Truly, I mean that's half the battle is knowing that.
Know your rights. Decide what matters, and see if you care.
And see if you care. And I'm sure in the next 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, our views are going to continue to evolve and change. And we might even listen to this and be like, oh, we were so different back then. I don't know. And hopefully we just evolve in a good way and we learn and grow for the better. But, it's interesting.
But it's been real. It's been good.
Yeah.
It's been real good.
We're still learning. We're not experts at this. We're just
it's
sharing
hard. It's
where
hard
we
to
are
know what to
in
do.
our path.
And we like to consider ourselves people that are like pretty good at reading the room. There are people, disabled or not, that just don't have that skill.
Yeah. Very true. Very true.
So,
we try.
It's nice to make, be more aware of things, but also try not to let insecurity or embarrassment or shame make us stay silent.
Yeah. So we're still on our journey too, and as are all of you listening. If you are disabled in any way, and if you have different views on this, we'd love to hear them. You can find us on Instagram at rare.with.flair or at our email hello@rarewithflair.com.
We got a lovely email from a listener that we're actually going to talk about on our next episode.
Yes, we can't wait.
If you want to email us for any reason, just to say, hey, we always love your emails and appreciate reading them. They really make our day.
Yes, they do. And we're on Facebook as well. And if you want to give us a review or a rating, we would also truly appreciate it. We'd love to hear from you guys, and that's a great way to show your support. Yeah.
Well, we love y'all.
We love you. We'll see you in 2 weeks.
Bye.